I'm Robin. Standing in the grand, opulent private dining room of the Regal Hotel, overlooking the vast expanse of Lake Superior, I'm surrounded by stunned faces. My family, who just moments ago had dismissed me as an outsider, now look at me in disbelief. The air is thick with shock and a tinge of embarrassment. It all started 3 weeks ago when I received an email invitation to the annual Strategic Investment Review. The Blackwood family, known for their success in the medical and pharmaceutical industries, was gathering to discuss their business ventures. I, a seemingly ordinary consultant, RSVP'd yes, took a day off from my work, and drove 3 hours from Detroit to Minneapolis for this meeting. When I arrived at the hotel, I saw my father, Henry Blackwood, standing at the doorway. He was dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than a year's rent for most people. His hand shot up like a stop sign. "Robin," he said in that condescending tone he reserved for those he thought were beneath him. "I don't think you understand what this meeting is about." I calmly replied, "The family portfolio, investment strategies, annual review." He adjusted his cufflinks nervously and said, "This is for family members who've actually contributed. You don't have any investments to review." Behind him, I could see my brother Ethan, setting up a presentation. His wife, Lily, was arranging folders at each seat. My sister, Ava, was showing my mother, Grace, something on her tablet, and they were both laughing. My uncle, George, and aunt, Mildred, were sitting at the head of the table, looking like the wise elders overseeing the family's success. I quietly said, "I have investments." My mother appeared beside my father, her diamond necklace glinting in the light. Grace had a knack for delivering cutting remarks with a sweet smile. "We all know about your little consulting business. It's nice, dear, but this meeting is about real investments. Your father has his medical device companies, Ethan has the pharmaceutical ventures, and Ava has her biotech startups. This isn't the place for a small consulting practice." I said, "I'm not here to discuss my consulting work." My father asked, "Then what can you contribute? You live in a rental apartment, drive an old car, and work for mid-sized companies. That's not the same as building multi-million-dollar enterprises." Ethan joined us at the door. At 39, he had the look of a successful healthcare executive, with designer glasses, a perfectly tailored suit, and an expensive watch. "Hey, Robin, this might not be the best use of your time. We'll be talking about FDA approval timelines, clinical trial results. It's pretty dry if you're not in the industry." I said, "I understand those topics." Ethan replied, "Understanding and actively working in them are different. You consult for manufacturing and logistics firms. That's not the cutting edge of medical innovation." Ava, at 30, had always been the family favorite. She was a Harvard MBA, with multiple successful biotech startups under her belt, and was married to another Harvard graduate. "Robin, this meeting is really industry-specific. You'll probably be bored. Let's grab coffee later instead." I simply said, "I want to attend the meeting." My father's patience snapped. "Robin, this is for successful family members. You're a consultant. That's fine, but it's not the same. This isn't your world." My mother added, "We're not saying you're a failure, dear. You're just on a different, smaller path." I repeated, "I have investments to discuss." Ethan asked with condescension, "What investments? Do you own stock in the consulting firm you work for?" "That's not what this meeting is about." I said, "I own a consulting firm. For 6 years now, and it has 35 employees across 5 states. But that's not what I'm here to discuss." My family exchanged glances. They were clearly caught off guard, but it wasn't surprising since they'd never bothered to ask about my work. My father's expression hardened. "Robin, what investment portfolio? You can't expect us to believe you have holdings comparable to ours." I said quietly, "I'm not expecting you to believe. I was invited, and I have investments to discuss. I want to participate." My father raised his voice, "This is ridiculous. George, Mildred, can you explain to Robin that this meeting has prerequisites? Uncle George, at 70, the family patriarch who built the initial Blackwood fortune through medical patents, appeared at the door. Robin, your father makes a valid point. This meeting involves large sums and complex strategies. We're talking about portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not sure what you can contribute. Just then, my phone started vibrating in my pocket. I ignored it and said again, I'd like to participate. My father flatly said, no. This meeting is for serious investors. You can join us for lunch, but not the portfolio discussion. I repeated, my level? My father said, frustrated, you're not in the same financial league. You rent an apartment, drive an old car, and work for unknown companies. Don't pretend you belong here. My phone kept vibrating. I said, I'll ask one more time. May I attend this meeting? My mother, her smile gone, said, Robin, you're embarrassing yourself and us. Just leave gracefully. I turned and walked away from the frosted glass doors, feeling the weight of their dismissal. In the empty hallway, decorated with overpriced abstract art, I pulled out my phone. There were 8 missed calls from my attorney, Mark Thompson, 4 from my investment manager, Lisa Chen, and 3 from my CFO, Rachel Lee. I called Mark first. Robin, he said urgently. We have a situation. Your family's investment meeting. They don't know your Summit Capital, do they? I said, no. He said, we need to tell them. Henry Blackwood just announced a major restructuring of Blackwood Medical Devices. He's planning to take on $200 million in debt using the company's revenue as collateral. The problem is, Summit Capital holds their existing $250 million debt. Taking on additional senior debt without our approval is a default event, which would trigger immediate repayment and bankrupt the company. Just then, my phone buzzed with a call from Lisa. I switched lines. Lisa, please tell me you're stopping this. Lisa said, Ethan just sent out a press release about a merger between his pharmaceutical company and a European competitor. The merger involves liquidating preferred shares, and Summit Capital owns 75% of those shares. If this goes public, the merger will fall apart, and all shareholders, including you, will lose money. Your position could lose about $100 million in value. My third line showed Rachel calling. I switched again. Rachel. Rachel said, Ava is presenting a biotech investment opportunity. She's asking family members to invest $60 million in a gene therapy clinical trial, claiming it's low risk, high reward. But it's actually high risk. And since Summit Capital is a major investor in 3 competing gene therapy companies, if we don't disclose this information, we could be liable for securities fraud. I asked, what's the total exposure if I let this play out? Rachel said, best case, $220 million in losses across your holdings. Worst case, $360 million in legal liability, and your family will lose everything in the bankruptcies and lawsuits. I interrupted, it's not personal. It's business. Get Mark and Lisa on a conference line. We're going to crash their meeting. 5 minutes later, I was on the phone with Mark, Lisa, and Rachel. Mark said, we can send a formal letter disclosing your position, but it won't stop the decisions in progress. Lisa offered, we can request an emergency injunction, but it'll leak to the press. Rachel said, or you walk in there and tell them yourself, right now, before Henry signs the debt agreement, Ethan issues the press release, and Ava commits family funds to a bad investment. I asked, how long before Henry's debt announcement? Mark said, he's scheduled in 12 minutes. Ethan's press release goes out in 25 minutes, and Ava's pitch is in 40 minutes. I walked back to the private dining room. Through the frosted glass, I could see Ethan taking a bow after his presentation. Ava was at the podium, getting ready to present. When I opened the door, my father saw me first. His expression went from surprise to irritation. Robin, I thought we were clear. I walked in and said, I need to speak. Before Henry presents his restructuring plan. My father started to ask, how do you know about? Then shook his head. It doesn't matter. This is a closed meeting. You need to leave. I said clearly, I'm a major investor in Blackwood Medical Devices. I have a right to be here. The room went silent. Ethan froze mid-bow, Ava stood with her mouth slightly open, my mother looked confused, and Uncle George frowned deeply. My father demanded, what are you talking about? I said, Summit Capital holds $250 million in debt from Blackwood Medical Devices. Your restructuring plan violates the debt covenants. My father's face turned red. That's impossible. Summit Capital is a New York investment fund. You're a consultant in Detroit. I said, I'm the sole owner of Summit Capital and I've been for 8 years. Ethan said, that's absurd. Summit Capital manages over $2.5 billion in assets. You can't possibly. I corrected, as of last quarter, it's $2.6 billion across 50 investments in medical technology, pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and healthcare services. My team includes 13 investment managers, 7 analysts, and 5 attorneys. Our offices are in New York, Boston, and Los Angeles. Ava said, this is insane. You expect us to believe you own a multi-billion-dollar investment fund? I pulled out my phone and said, Mark, send the verification documents to everyone in this room. Phones started buzzing around the table. As they read the documents, I watched as understanding dawned on their faces, confusion, disbelief, shock, and horror. Uncle George said slowly, these documents show Summit Capital owning significant positions in all of our companies. Is this real? I suggested, call your attorneys. Have them verify. I'll wait. Uncle George stepped away to make the call. My father scrolled through the documents, his face changing colors. My mother went pale. Ethan stared at his phone as if it would make sense if he stared hard enough. My father finally said, you're telling me you own $250 million of my company's debt? I said, yes. Lisa's voice came through my phone. Summit Capital owns 75% of the Series B preferred shares in Ethan's pharmaceutical company. Rachel added, we're a major investor in 3 gene therapy companies competing with Ava's project, which creates disclosure obligations. Ava sat down heavily. You've been investing in my competitors? I corrected, I've been investing in the most promising gene therapy companies. Your company is good, but it's not the only one in the space. Uncle George returned and said, I spoke with my attorney. He confirms that Summit Capital is owned by Robin, and the investment positions are accurate. My mother said faintly, you manage $2.6 billion? I clarified, I manage a portfolio worth $2.6 billion. My personal net worth is around $500 million, depending on valuations. Ethan demanded, how is this possible? You live in a rental apartment and drive an old car. I said, I live in a rental because I travel a lot for work and don't want the hassle of a house. I drive a reliable car because I don't care about impressing people. And my consulting work is great due diligence for my investments. My father said, his voice strained, you've been doing this for 8 years and never said anything? I said quietly, I tried. Do you remember Thanksgiving 6 years ago? I mentioned starting an investment fund. You laughed. Christmas 5 years ago, I said I'd made successful medical technology investments. You told me to be careful. After that, I stopped trying to tell you about my work. My mother said, angry, you let us make fools of ourselves. I corrected, you made fools of yourselves by assuming you knew everything about me without asking. I didn't hide anything. All my investments are public record. Ava said, the gene therapy investment. You'll tell everyone it's high risk. I said, it is high risk, with a 12% chance of success according to industry standards. describing it as low risk is securities fraud. Ethan said, the merger. You're saying I can't? I said, you can't liquidate preferred shares without majority shareholder approval. The deal needs to be restructured. I've known about it for 6 weeks. My team analyzed it, and the structure is wrong. My father asked, and my restructuring? I said, I'll require approval as a note holder. The expansion plan is solid, but taking on $200 million in senior debt at the proposed terms is risky. There are better ways to finance it. Uncle George asked, Robin, where did you get the initial capital? I said, I inherited $600,000 from Grandpa when I graduated college. You all told me to invest it conservatively. I invested it in a medical device startup, and it was acquired 3 years later for $50 million. My stake was worth $9 million. My mother said, you turned $500,000 into $9 million? I said, that was the first investment. I've made 190 investments since then. 150 were successful, 30 broke even, and 10 failed. The successful investments include 4 IPOs, 13 acquisitions, and ongoing positions in 50 companies. Total return over 9 years is about 4,800%. Ethan said, his voice controlled, our failure of a sister is actually more successful than all of us combined? I said, I'm not in competition with you. I'm happy for your successes. I've invested in your companies because I believe in you, even when you didn't believe in me. Ava said, you let us block you from this meeting. I said, I wanted to see if anyone would defend me. No one did. My mother protested, that's not fair. I asked, you've known me for so long. You've seen me graduate with honors and build a consulting business. At what point should you have assumed I knew what I was talking about? Uncle George cleared his throat. I think Robin has earned a seat at this table. I move that we restructure this meeting to include her full participation, knowing that Summit Capital is a major stakeholder in our family business decisions. Aunt Mildred seconded, Robin should have been included from the start. We were wrong to exclude her. Ethan asked, so we just pretend the last 9 years didn't happen? I said, I'm not a billionaire. The question is whether we can respect each other and have honest conversations. My father said, you want respect after humiliating us? I said, I want to be seen and heard. I don't need celebration or apology. Just acknowledge that I'm more than the disappointing daughter. My mother was crying. We got it so wrong. I said, yes, you did. I don't know how to fix it, but maybe we can start by having a proper meeting where everyone's contributions are valued. Ethan asked, you'd still participate after what we said? I said, you're my family. I'm angry and hurt, but I have $320 million invested in your companies. If you succeed, we all benefit. So, yes, I'll participate if you listen. Uncle George said, then let's start over. Robin, would you like to present Summit Capital's portfolio? I pulled up my presentation. I'd be happy to. For the next 3 hours, we worked through the family portfolio. I explained the debt covenants and offered alternative financing for my father's company. I helped Ethan restructure his merger to protect all shareholders. I provided Ava with detailed risk analysis and connected her with potential collaborators. As we left the room, Ava caught my arm. I'm sorry for what I said. I should have asked. I said, I'm sorry, too, for not trying harder to correct your assumptions. Ethan joined us. The consulting business with 35 employees. Is it real? I said, yes. Blackwood Analysis Group. We specialize in operational efficiency for mid-size companies. Our annual revenue last year was $9 million. Ethan looked stunned. That's not a small consulting practice. I said, it's not my passion. My passion is funding medical innovation that helps people. My parents approached. My father said, we owe you an apology. For years of assumptions. I said, yes, you do. I don't know if you can be forgiven, but we can try. My father said, we will do better. I said, don't promise. Just do it. Show up, ask questions, and listen. Uncle George was waiting by the elevators. He smiled and said, your grandfather would be very proud. He always said you had a head for business. I said, he was right about a lot of things. He said, thank you for protecting us, even after how we treated you. I said, it took pragmatism and a bit of stubbornness. I wasn't going to let you all destroy yourselves. He laughed. Fair enough. I left the hotel and walked to my old car, which started reliably. My phone showed messages from Mark, Lisa, and Rachel, confirming that the disasters had been averted. Ethan's merger was being restructured, my father's financing was being renegotiated, and Ava's investment pitch would be revised. I received a message from my father, family dinner next Sunday? Your mother wants.